everyone. We're going to get started with our program here. I'm so excited to see all of your lovely faces. How many of you, you've been to more than one event during Cleveland Book Week? Oh, look at these hands. I love it. I'm going to go ahead and get us started tonight. I know we're all excited. I'm Tara Pringle Jefferson. I'm the Digital Communications Manager for the Anisfield-Wolf Book Awards, and it's my honor to greet you today as we gather for this lovely evening of poetry. This event is actually a year in the making, as we had planned to honor Victoria Chang, our 2021 winner for poetry, in this beautiful community mausoleum, but the summer pandemic surges of the previous year made us shift our plans out of an abundance of caution. But a delay was not a denial, and we are now gathered to celebrate Obit, Chang's inventive and mesmerizing exploration of grief and love. Anisfield-Wolf juror Rita Dove responded strongly to Obit. During jury deliberations in 2021, she wrote, quote, "At first one might think, what a gimmick to force each poem into the narrow column of a newspaper obit. And yet, after the requisite announcements, name of the deceased, time, cause of death, each obit plunges to the source of its bereavement, skewering as it darkens, until I'm left speechless, bereft, in Keats' veil of soul-making." I think you would all agree that this space provides us with the opportunity to ponder, to reflect, and digest Chang's work all the more vividly. Now I'd like to turn it over to Adam Clemens from Lakeview Cemetery, as he can give us a little bit of information about the space that we're gathered in and the cemetery itself.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my name is Adam Clemens. I'm the Special Programs Manager here at Lakeview Cemetery Foundation, the philanthropic partner of Lakeview Cemetery. As you can imagine, it takes a significant amount of undertaking to manage a cemetery of our size. We're just about 285 acres. There's 10 miles of roadways through the cemetery. We have 118,000 residents. We have about 40 acres or so undeveloped here at the cemetery still, so we are a very active cemetery. We have about 700 burials a year, averaging about 2 a day. I think we had 6 today alone. So we're a very active cemetery, but we're also open for the people. We're here for the living. It's a cemetery, a park for the living to enjoy and experience while we're here. So this type of event is exactly with exactly where we enjoy celebrating life as it is in these spaces that we have here. There's always something new to see in the cemetery, wherever you are throughout the grounds. We have such history in the buildings that we have. We have the James A. Garfield Memorial to our 20th President of the United States. We also have the Wade Memorial Chapel, one of the very few buildings in the world that is designed by the interior designed by Louis Comfort Tiffany Studios, with a very large Tiffany window as well, both of which are on the National Historic Registry. So it's really wonderful to have all of you here to experience life the way that while we're all still here. This building is really interesting. The Community Mausoleum. We have, as you look around, you see a great different visual of life, of what people want what they wanted their lives to represent. Not all of the niches that you see around here with things in them the people have deceased. Some of them are still living, but they're still celebrating their own lives. Just as you can see with the pictures of family, artifacts from their life, telling their stories. So that's really what it is all about here at Lakeview Cemetery is telling the story of life. So thank you very much for you all for bringing this lecture to Lakeview Cemetery.
All right, so we're going to keep the show rolling. I'm going to welcome to the mic now Matt Wynkomm. He is the Executive Director of Literary Cleveland, whose Incubator Conference just wrapped this past weekend, which is marking the official start to Cleveland Book Week. So Matt.
I'm here to introduce our first reader, Allie Black. Most of us strive to be either writers or teachers or community programs coordinators, and if you're lucky, you get to be good at two of those things. Allie Black is great at all three. Allie Black lives and works in Cleveland, Ohio as a writer and educator. She spent the past decade leading and facilitating literacy-based workshops to youth and adults, including the most recent project, The Most Promising, a year-long creative writing program for teens. She's the author of the remarkable poetry collection, If It Heals at All, which was selected by Jackie Shelton Green for the New Voices series at Jakar Press. The book was also named a finalist for the 2021 Ohio Book Award. Writing has appeared in Literary Hub, the Atticus Review, the Rumpus, the Offing. You have to check out some of these if you have not before. And forthcoming in Crazy Horse and the Adroit General. You're in for a real treat. Please welcome Allie Black.
Thank you, Matt. Hold on one second. I have to get settled in. I have a lot of items. All right. So thank you so much for having me. I'm Allie, and it's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks to all of you for being here as well. It's such an honor to be reading alongside Victoria Chang. I'm a huge fan of your work, especially Obit and Dear Memory. So thank you so much for your work, and thank you to Tara and Karen Long for inviting me, and thank you to the Cleveland Foundation. I'm going to read about 6 poems, I think, and most of these poems deal with grief and loss, which is the heart of most of my poems. So this first poem is entitled Kinsman. The day after the baby is killed by a gunshot wound to the chest, you still have to ride behind death's blood-red breath. You still have to picture the baby in the car trying to grab the bullet as if it were a glossy, sweet thing. You do not want to imagine the pitch of the baby's wail. You do not want to see the women walking with bright white Save-A-Lot bags wrapped around their wrists. You do not want to see the man at the RTA bus stop swatting at a bee. You do not want to see anyone trying to hurt anything. You do not want to face the red lights, the teddy bear memorials, the trash, the raggedy strollers, the slow walk of the low-down folks. You do not want to ride by the hand-painted casino trip sign stapled high on a pole like a goal. You do not want to hear the radio scroll through tragedy and woe. You hear the beginning of the word Oregon, and you know the next stories will be about more shootings. You think about the baby killed by the bullet. First funeral of the year. I'm a little out of the loop. I buy breath mints instead of flowers. I wear the wrong shoes. I leave my facial tissue in the car. Google lied. Grief doesn't give you meaning, but hey, what do I know? At the funeral, an usher offers me a seat. I shake my head no, fake like I got it, like I can stand in Vince Camuto heels for the full service. My feet burn during the opening prayer. These days, I no longer care about bowing my head. I pray with my eyes open. I never say amen. So this poem too is a new poem out of a new collection that I'm working on, and I think this poem is upcoming in Crazy Horse. Once everybody started dying, we thought we could start a business. We even gave it a name, like it would come to fruition, like it was something worth trying. To be fair though, the hood was hitting us up every time a body dropped. This girl wanted a casket wrapped. That dude needed a t-shirt, a bio written, a band booked, a singer scouted, a prayer picked, a balloon released, a flyer posted, the photos gathered, remarks given. I even created a folder and labeled it Live Forever, and inside that folder I made more folders and labeled each one with the dead person's name. And just like a list, it grew too long, so I had to walk away. Funny how death can make you feel invincible, or is it incredible? I don't have words these days, but it seems I do have dreams. Or are they ideas that feel urgent and awful all at the same time? Who in their right mind can get to work in times of grief? We thought we could start a business. We even gave it a name. So this next poem is the moments we would have shared with my father. And I was thinking about how my father never had a chance to meet my husband, Donald Black Jr., who is here. So the moments we would have shared with my father. For you, my father would have fried the okra with peanut oil. He'd call you son, and y'all be down south drinking Remy Martin. We'd all go fishing, and my father would bait the hook with a worm. In a cold and empty basement, he'd show you how to kill a rat with a shovel. Every moment would be a lesson on survival. When my mother died, my friends don't come over to help me sort through my mother's things, the ashtrays, the bills, the navy blue suits. No one brings me a home-cooked meal. I don't belong to a church, so there's no such thing as a pastor stopping by to read scripture with me. The neighbor doesn't send her condolences. The world doesn't stop. No one grieves the way I do. I can't find anyone to fry the catfish the way my mother used to. Hot oil, good breading. Her friends don't resurface before the service to tell me how my mother was the star of the crew. I don't ask anyone to pray for me. I just have one more poem. And thank you again to the Clean Foundation and to Tara and to Karen Long and Victoria Chang. Thank you so much for your work. And thank you again to all of you for being here. When Quan died. This might sound weird, but hands down, Quan had the rawest homegoing. D Black made this mosaic image of Quan's face and put it on a shirt, and the whole hood lined up outside our garage to buy one to rock to the funeral. We made so many the printer broke, and that was my proof that Quan was the type of nigga that would make an impact on everything forever. When the pastor invited the family to the casket for a final viewing, I swear to God, if they shattered and the flowers fell to the floor like they knew nothing would ever be the same. And when the funeral was over, D Black rode his ripper to the gravesite, popping willies all up and down Kinsman. At 144th, we all blew our horns because that was Quan Street, and Sharon and them was hanging out the car windows dancing as they blasted Quan's song. But the best thing was when Alvin started doing backflips at the cemetery. I got chills watching him because I know how death can make you want to wreck some shit, but sometimes your body won't let you, so you do whatever else comes out. Niggas kicked it at the repast. We played Quan's song and did his dance and sipped our drinks to celebrate and numb ourselves. Thank you.
for that incredible reading, and you all see why we invited her here tonight. Now we're going to transition to a moment that we have been waiting for a whole year. Victoria Chang, as I mentioned before, is our 2021 winner for poetry for Obit. Obit was named a New York Times notable book, a Time Magazine must-read book, and received the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. It was also longlisted for a National Book Award and named a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Griffin International Poetry Prize. Victoria Chang has received a Guggenheim Fellowship. She lives in Los Angeles and is acting program chair and faculty member within Antioch's low residency MFA program. She's also the current poetry editor of the New York Times. Please help me welcome to the mic, Victoria Chang.
Can I touch this? Yes. Can I touch it? So thanks for coming, and thank you to the Cleveland Foundation, the Lakeview Cemetery, Karen Long, the Anisfield-Wolf folks, Stephanie Hicks-Thompson of the Lakeview Cemetery, Tara and Emma for all the help throughout this process. Running any one particular event, I think, is an enormous amount of work, and yet we do it all week long, probably all year long, and then do it every year. So I just want to thank you for all the work that you do. I'm going to turn my timer on just to make sure I stay in the band that I was asked to. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to read from Obit a little bit, and then I'll read some little miniature poems, I call them, from this new book that just came out, and then I'll read maybe like one or two new poems that I've been working on. And this book, there's really not much you need to know, except the fact that my mom passed away, and oh, Allie, thank you. I wrote it down. What a lovely reading. Sorry I didn't say hello and thank you. So thank you. It was a pleasure to read with you. My mother passed away in 2015 of pulmonary fibrosis. So that's when your lungs they harden for whatever reason, and you gradually suffocate to death. And so anyone who's experienced that, it's pretty brutal. But I didn't want to write elegies, so I waited a while for no particular reason. And then one day I heard on NPR that they were talking about this documentary, the Obit. It was called Obit, on obituary writers. And something about that word was really interesting to me. And then I just went home and I wrote a whole bunch of these things that eventually became these little obituary poems. So I'll just read a few. My father also had a stroke about 15 years ago, so he's in here quite a bit. And he had aphasia for a long time, and then he passed away in January. Music. Died on August 7th, 2015. I made a video with old pictures and music for the funeral. I picked Hallelujah in a cappella because they weren't really singing, but actually crying. When my children came into the room, I pretended I was writing. Instead, I looked at my mother's old photos, the fabric patterns on all her shirts, the way she held her hands together at the front of her body. In each picture, the small brown purse that now sits under my desk. At the funeral, my brother-in-law kept turning the music down. When he wasn't looking, I turned the music up, because I wanted these people to feel what I felt. When I wasn't looking, he turned it down again. At the end of the day, someone took the monitor and speakers away, but the music was still there. This was my first understanding of grief. My mother had dentures, and as a child, I remember seeing glasses in the bathroom of dentures soaking all the time. And it wasn't until she died did I realize that they weren't the same pair of dentures that I had seen my whole life. There was like a whole box of them. My mother's teeth died twice, once in 1965, all pulled out from gum disease, once again on August 3rd, 2015. The fake teeth sit in a box in the garage. When she died, I touched them, smelled them, and thought I heard a whimper. I shook the teeth into my mouth, but having two sets of teeth only made me hungrier. When my mother died, I saw myself in the mirror, her words around my mouth like powder from a donut. Her last words were in English. She asked for a Sprite. I wonder whether her last thought was in Chinese. I wonder what her last thought was. I used to think that a dead person's words die with them. Now I know that they scatter, looking for meaning to attach to like a scent. My mother used to collect orange blossoms in a small, shallow bowl. I passed the tree each spring. I always knew that grief was something I could smell, but I didn't know that it's not actually a noun, but a verb, that it moves. This one's called Friendships. Friendships died June 24th, 2009, once beloved but not consistently beloved. The mirror won the battle. I am now imprisoned in the mirror, all my selves spread out like a deck of cards. It's true, the grieving speak a different language. I am separated from my friends by gauze. I will drive myself to my own house for the party. I will make small talk with myself, spill a drink on myself. When it's over, I will drive myself back to my own house. My conversations with other parents about children pass me on the way up the staircase and repeat on the way down. Before my mother's death, I sat anywhere. Now I look for the image of the empty chair near the image of the empty table. An image is a kind of distance. An image of me sits down. Depression is a glove over the heart. Depression is an image of a glove over the image of a heart. Maybe I'll read two more of these and then I'll move to something else. They have a tonal consistency to them that after a while I kind of get tired of reading them. Grief. As I knew it died many times. It died trying to reunite with other lesser deaths. Each morning I lay out my children's clothing to cover their grief. The grief remains, but is changed by what it is covered with. A picture of oblivion is not the same as oblivion. My grief is not the same as my pain. My mother was a mathematician, so I tried to calculate my grief. My father was an engineer, so I tried to build a box around my grief, along with a small wooden bed that grief could lie down on. The text kept interrupting my grief, forcing me to speak about nothing. If you cut out a rectangle of a perfectly blue sky, no clouds, no wind, no birds, frame it with a blue frame, place it face up on the floor of an empty museum with an open atrium to the sky, that is grief. Maybe I'll just read this one last one from this book. It's called The Bees. I think this was actually the first one I wrote, the first obituary that I wrote. I put it towards the end of the book. The Bees. 268 million years old from the Philippines passed away on April 26, 2217 in Nome, Alaska. The detaching icebergs crushed the bees who used to fly over conference rooms. Once I nearly died in a small plane with the CEO, CFO, and COO during their IPO. On the ground, the CEO glared at me as if I had caused the storm, as if the yellow lights had come from my mind, as if the buzzing had come from my shaking, as if the lightning were a box I had tripped over. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had become estranged from a part of myself that wanted to stay alive, that wanted them to remain alive. In the same way, I had become estranged from my mother forever, but not from her death. So I think maybe I will move to something different. That's okay? Not that you have a choice. So I am going to read from this book. It's very pink. It's called The Trees Witness Everything. And it was really just a fun kind of thing that I was doing. So there are these tiny miniature poems that are in various syllabic forms, and I borrow a lot of Japanese syllabic forms, so patterns like 577, their names for all of them, like the Sudoka is 577, 577, and obviously Japanese character and or Chinese character, they have one syllable. English language is totally different. So at some point I recognized really what I was doing was kind of just writing syllabics, a la Marion Moore, that kind of thing. But the syllabics, it was a way to kind of get out of my own way, to sort of let subject matter go where the syllables were going. And so that was a fun kind of thing. And then to add an added sort of fun kind of complication, I used W.S. Merwin's poem titles as my own poem titles. So why, you may ask? The titles are really cool because they're very flexible. And usually just, like me at least, I just start writing and who the heck knows. This was a little different because I started with the title. That was a totally different kind of thing for me. And so I'll just read a few of these, and there are 2 on each page. And they're really about nothing, which is really wonderful. And you'll see these titles, and this one's called Far Along in the Story. Once I sat in rain, opened my mouth to the sky. I yearned to be changed, but each drop was a small knife. At first I fainted, but when I woke up, all the ticking had gone and all the centuries were won. My choices no longer hurt. Losing a language. We were born with a large door on our backs. When will we know if it opens? See about nothing, right? Green fields. I was supposed to return to the fields daily. I haven't been there since birth. On some nights, I smell smoke that I think is God calling me, but when I follow, there's just a clothesline with half a life clipped on it, drying in the sun. Prophecy. I want to believe that each of us has a note, that at the end of the year, the stars do turn off. There's so much suffering, but ask for proof, and I have none. Snowfall. We say the snow falls, but it really seizes. Because it is light, it takes 7 years to grab. By the time it does, the old wars are over, and my mother is dead. But it lands on the new wars, melts on a different mother. Still morning. No mornings are still. The newly dead move the most. They force flowers to dilate. Little soul. I rode on your back until your knees broke, and now 1 mile left, I must toss you. When the war's over. I once saw the deer. They were all wearing blue scarves. We have finally finished killing everything. We are now looking ahead with killed past the future. Turning. My mother is dead. The lemons still turn yellow. The trout still stare emptily. Desire is still free. We still love many people, eat peaches as if kissing. the gods. The fact that leaves can't be put back on trees makes me think that you do not exist. Maybe I'll read that one. Let's see. 6. The lovers. There is a wildfire starting on top of a lake. See how the water holds fire but cannot end it? We insist on love when all we want is mercy. Let me just check my time really quickly. I also have a bunch of poems in the middle here that are, they're like these little rectangular poems that I wrote when I was in Marfa, Texas. I don't know if anyone's been there. Who's been to Marfa, Texas? Oh, not that many. There are 3 of you. It's an art town in the middle of nowhere. And Donald Judd, this artist, built this town in some ways. And there's this beautiful rectangular art there. And there's the Chinati Foundation there. And there's the Donald Judd Foundation. So if you're kind of an art person, it's a great place to visit. So I wrote a few poems while I was there that were epistolary poems. They're actually letters to a friend of mine, and I took that part out, so I'll just read one. Today I tried to open the river, but when I pulled, the whole river disappeared. I used to think that language came from the body. Now I know it is in that group of mountains across the field beyond the fence. Yesterday I saw a red-tailed hawk. When I went near it, it took the wind with it. I was left without air, but I could still breathe. I realized everything around me I could do without. I could hear the mountains, but nothing else. I saw a car start up, but I heard nothing. A gray-haired woman said hello to me, but I heard nothing. I stood and watched the hawk. It never looked at me, but knew I was there. Neither of us moved. Finally, it flew to the top of an electric pole. I realized the pole is all the years of my life, the mountains, applause, the hawk, what I have been trying to tell myself. And then I'll just read 4 little poems at the back of this book, and then I'll read a couple new poems. And this last section in this book, it was like, someone pointed out to me that a lot of poems in here are like commissioned projects, and I hadn't even noticed that myself, but this one was commissioned by the Los Angeles Public Library. And so people in the community and poets were given a prompt. You have to write a hopeful poem, which was hard for me. I wasn't sure if there was such a thing, but it was during the pandemic, and then they ran these poems, and we picked poems from the community, people who had entered poems, and they ran across LED lights across the 12 or 13 libraries in LA County, so it was really cool. Occasionally you'd see someone standing and just kind of reading it across, like it was old school, the little red lights going across. But I'll just read the last 4, and they're tiny. There is a bird and a stone in your body. Your job is not to kill the bird with a stone. Some of us are made only of nerve endings. At night, we light up like radio. One day, you'll wake up beating. One day, you'll wake up winged. Let me tell you a story about hope. It always starts and ends with birds. So I then now, I think we'll transition one last time to some new poems that I wrote. Actually, I finished the book. These are ekphrastic poems. Does anyone know what that is? Yeah, some of you? So they're just poems that are sort of in response to art, whatever kind of art that might be. So visual art, sculpture, photographs, anything. So I was asked by the MoMA in New York to pick a poem, painting, or actually, they didn't even give me that specific instruction. They said pick a, anything from their entire collection and write a poem. That's just, it's like too much. So I looked and I looked and I looked and I thought, I'm just going to write a poem based on an artist I love. And her name is Agnes Martin. And Agnes, does anyone know Agnes Martin? Not personally, but do you know the work of Agnes Martin? Yeah, you see him. She does these really amazing, she does a lot of stuff, but the things that really I resonated with, these like huge 10 by 10 pieces of art that were all in grids. And if you feel like Googling Agnes Martin, the work is quite extraordinary. And her notes are quite extraordinary too. There are all these little mathematical calculations. And there was just something about her work that I needed at the time. And I wrote one, but then I just kept on writing. And so I'll just read two, and then I'll stop. So unfortunately you can't see them because I don't have anything, but you can look them up if you want to. This one's called Untitled Number 5, 1998, and the other one's called Friendship, 1963. Untitled Number 5, 1998. In the Cy Twombly room, Cy Twombly is another visual artist who does these little scribbles that I love. I wanted so badly to be drawn on. The curves of Twombly's crayon as if possessed by syntax, each tiny white curve on the canvas a chokehold. That day I was small, as if I knew I was made by mistake. I walked from Twombly's room to Agnes's room without flinching. How easy to move from curves to lines when I used my legs, not my mind. Perhaps every person has many rooms. We can be divided into 9 sections of 11 lines. Each line is something seen for the first time. Maybe every poem is an attempt to describe lightning. Maybe lightning can't be described, which is why there are so many poems. It seems that we are all doing the same thing, opening our mouths and scribbling, because it is all we can do. We are mere trespassers. We inherit nothing but a body with a mouth and a hand. Some of us spend our lives trying to pin language to the sky, but language is the one that gets to stay. Sometimes I think about the child that the grandfather dropped out the window of the ship and wonder what happened to the screen that went down the side of the boat and where all the people who heard it went. And this is the last one I'll read. It's called Friendship, 1963. And it's this huge 10 by 10 in the MoMA in New York. If you ever have a chance, you should go see it. It's made with gold leaf. It's really stunning. And it's just her work has this kind of spirituality to it that's really hard to explain. Thank you for coming and listening. I came to the city so I could see gold. When I arrived, though, the leaves were gold too, and I became confused. I called the front desk 4 times. An angel answered each time. By the 3rd call, he ended with, "Talk soon." In the morning, a different man answered, and I burst into tears. On 53rd Street, small children kept on running into me. A father yelled so loudly at the boy on the scooter that I thought he knew I was carrying death on my back. By the time I arrived at the museum, there was a long line. The bald man in front of me kept turning around to look at me. I could tell by his forehead that he could hurt me. When I finally found the room, I was the only one in there. Everyone else was below me in the Picasso room. While I stared at the gold rectangles, 2 attendants talked about whether to work overtime and get paid time and a half. I wanted to tell them that there's no such thing as time, just time and a half. Sometime in the night, Ital Ednan had died. I had just seen her paintings the day before. The crowds were large, and I wondered whether our looking had accelerated her death. When I took a photo of Agnes's piece, I saw my dark reflection on the gold. I started counting the grids, but the bald man came up next to me. Suddenly, there were 2 dark shadows on the gold. I asked him to step away, but when he said no, it was Agnes's voice. Thank you.
right, so we are going to we have about 10 minutes for some Q&A. As I said before, we're so grateful to Victoria to be here and to read these poems. After the Q&A, we're going to transition to a book signing, so she will be behind me at this table here. If you still need to purchase your book, I think Max Backs is outside of the Mausoleum. They're still selling copies of Victoria's books for you. So I would like to welcome Victoria up here. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. And again, we have about 10 minutes or so. Okay. Anyone have questions? I'll repeat it for you if so everyone else can hear it if you have a question. Don't be shy. I'm very comfortable with waiting. Yeah.
I'll not say agree. I was just thinking about Obit, and when it happened, it felt very urgent. I think, especially with the pandemic and things, I think it helped a lot of people think about grief in that moment. And it occurred to me as I was thinking about it that would be a lot like a heavy weight for you to sort of be this person who's put other people's grief into words. And then just now you said that your newest book is about nothing. And so I was curious if if those two things follow one another. So your first two books were so sort of heavy that then you turned to this other piece which sort of just came out of not as deep a place. Well, not that it's not a deep place. I'm reading.
Yeah. I love when people ask questions because they're usually 7 questions in one. And then I have to figure out what you're really asking. But yeah, I think to your question about whether it's like a hard or heavy burden to have, I mean, I don't really know because I don't really think of grief as being like a thing that comes and ends, you know? It's like I feel like it just stays and you're always grieving in some ways, but it changes shape and your relationship to the grief changes and there are different kinds of grief. In this new book, and I just keep writing, like my father just passed away in January and I was writing while he was dying, which is different than my experience with my mother. I was at the University of Kansas yesterday and I was saying how when my mother passed away, I was shocked. I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but I never thought my mother would die. I just didn't think that was possible. You know, I thought she was immortal. So when she passed away, it just, it's like I couldn't believe it. And to this day, I can't believe that she died. Like, how is that possible? And I couldn't really write about that at all. But when my father passed away, it's a totally different relationship. You know, my dad and I are more similar. You know, my mom and I are more bonded in a really kind of interesting way. And with my dad, it was time. You know, he had been sick for so long and had died pretty much for me when he had a stroke. And so I just think, like, for me, grief is just a part of living. Like, that's our job, I guess, to grieve. I mean, look at this beautiful building that we're in and the numbers. You know, I think death is always associated with numbers, which is really interesting too. And that we were told how many people are here, residents, call them residents, were here, and how many funerals they have a day, a year. A lot of people die, and we all will too. And so for me, I think because I feel like we live in a kind of culture that tells us quickly to move on from things, I don't really like to live that way myself. I'm fine with being sad. So I think to me, it wasn't a burden at all. I think if anything, I'm happy to talk about it. If anyone needs to talk to me or wants to talk to me, everyone's experience is connected but unique in that way. And your other question, I think you were talking about like the writing like very heavily about a specific thing, which is the subject matter of Obit was very much about grief. But I think there are a lot of other subject matters that people pick up on with language, is a big piece of things I explore in there that I also explore later in my Agnes Martin poems. And I do think that after writing something like that, I just wanted to goof around a bit. And so I think I did that with this, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And Danique and I were talking about how writing is just in the process of writing is joy. And we were saying how some people talk about how hard writing is, and we're like, but it's so fun. And if you don't love that, then there's no reason to do it. It's just that process is what I went through to write the book, The Trees Witness Everything. And Obit, I think I just needed to write it somehow. And so it came out really quickly, but I did spend, you were saying you spent like 2 to 3 years revising. I'm about the same. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I wondered when you like to write and how you juggle it with all your other jobs and responsibilities.
Yeah.
How you get there.
That's a great question. I'm a busy person. But I also think I don't think I'm busy. I think I like to be busy. So I don't try and make it seem like I'm so busy or me. Like I actually think there are about 100 things that I don't need to do, but I insist on doing them. I don't know why. I think there's some people like that. And I think maybe there's pressure. And so when I do sit down and write, it's such a gift and I love it so much. And actually Danique and I are just talking about how I published so many books in a short period of time after not writing and publishing that much at all for the last 15 years. It's like 3 books, like Obit and Dear Memory, which is this hybrid collage kind of book, and The Trees Witness Everything are kind of like a trilogy, like 2020, 2021, and 2022. I feel very creative right now, and I hear that's true with people my age, and it can't be true that there's suddenly more time or there's a burst of creativity. I certainly feel that way, so I write a lot now. So I would say every morning I carve out a couple hours now, and then on the weekends, because I love numbers too, and I was just adding up recently, like, well, how many hours do I write poems or work on my poems? I spend sometimes like the entire day on Saturday and Sunday writing poems, and then you add up all the little hours during the week. It's like a part-time job, writing 20, 25 hours a week. Just revising and revising over and over again. So a lot. I definitely spend a lot of time doing it now, but never that much before. Mm-hmm.
With the new poems, the expressed ones, I was wondering how looking at the artworks is like or unlike reading literature.
Totally, yeah. For me, I need something to press against. So for me, poems are me just as a person is like a correspondence. Like I feel like my whole life is one large, long correspondence with different things. So for the art, I was looking at it as something to talk at. Sometimes I was counting grids. There are 467. I mean, a lot of poems, they're like counting grids. And it's really a fun thing to do. It just kind of got my mind outside of, I am writing a poem. This is very serious, but I was counting. And so it became a really fun thing. And it was a way to get my mind out of that precious act of making art, with a capital A. It was just a really neat thing to be in conversation with Agnes's work, and then also her writings are really cool. I read her writings like 10 years ago, and I went back and revisited that, and I did a ton of research. I read all of her biographies. Like any chance I get, I'll go to a museum. I just went to the Cleveland, looking for if there happens to be an Agnes Martin around. So I'll do that a lot, and then it ends up in my poems somehow. Yeah.
A few months ago, one of my high school classmates appeared on the front page of the New York Times. He was an artist in New York City. And apparently, I didn't know this, but there was a listserv from our high school class, and people talk a lot about his sexual orientation. He's gay man. And that didn't appear in the Obit. And can you give us any insights about how, this is a little bit off track, but
It's fine.
how that kind of decision is made, you know, whether to say that or not? He was clearly out.
Yeah, no, it's interesting when the New York Times actually interviewed me about how to write a real obituary. And I did all this reading and research, and it's a fascinating art form, the real obituary. And I learned a lot about how different people approach it. There's not one size fits all for what an obituary is, you know, and sometimes people are funny. Sometimes they are really celebratory of the person's life versus focusing so much on their death kind of thing. Sometimes they write these beautiful, colorful descriptions that really describe a personhood that you can actually see who they are. And so they usually end with who has survived them. So I did do a lot of research. I think it's a form that we have, but I think there's quite a bit of freedom within that form to do what feels right for that individual. I mean, in the same way, these wonderful containers are all different, and people put different things in them because I think every single person is unique. One more? Anyone? Yeah.
Actually, that puts the right to my question. I read Obit last spring, and one of the poems that stuck with me was sort of maybe 2/3 or 3/4 in, when you raise the possibility, what if the obituary writer dies before the obituary subject? That got me to thinking, it's like each poem sort of stands on its own in the book, but at the same time there is a sequence and narrative to it. Can you speak to that sort of tension?
Yeah, the one you're talking about is the obituary writer can die before the subject. You have a good memory, that's almost exactly what you said. John Wilson died in 2002 before the publication of his obituary on bandleader Artie Shaw, who died in 2004. Well, this was a fact I learned, that people who are famous have obituaries written long before they're dead. I'm sure a lot of you all know that, which is really strange to think about. And I think each one, people say I wander a lot in my poems, and I think that the thing that starts it, like doctors died on July 16, 2014, it hardly stays there. Like by the end of the poem, I think that like this one, the doctor's one, we're in high school. In high school, I loved when the teacher turned the lights off, a moment to feel loved and unseen at once. I understand now we can't be loved when the lights are off. I mean, I don't understand how I ended up there, but I think that the starting point was a way to trigger something, an exploratory thing, and then my mind just kind of wanders and I go wherever. And sometimes I think I go into the surreal too. So there's no pattern. I kind of just, it's whatever I feel like writing at the moment, however it goes, it goes. Yeah. Is it good? All right, thank you.
All right, that concludes our program. We are done with all of our Anisfield-Wolf author events this week, but there is one more this weekend. Tomorrow, the Great Lakes African American Writers Conference takes place. You can go to their website. There's still time to register, and they're also having a Sunday brunch at Lander Haven, which is going to be fantastic. So thank you all again for coming. Again, we have our book signing behind me, book sales up front where you came in, and take some cookies and treats from Presley's Bakery on your way out. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Friday.